I can tell you from personal experience, 50 years is a very, very long time. Hi there. My name is Charles Ray Dawson. I am the Associate Broker Residential Sales Manager of ProStar Realty. This is the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast, episode 249. I hope you guys are having a really great week like I am. It is something that does not happen often, ever. 250th birthday United States Marine Corps, and the 250th, we had 250 anniversary of the United States Marine Corps, 75th anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and we had Veterans Day. So let's just say there's been a lot of song, merriment, and alcohol flowing around over here in my neck of the woods lately. But it is Thursday, and as always, I try to get something out on Thursday. Last week, we had a little truncated one because I had to record it early because we had a shredathon to bring in some money for the VFW post. We did make money. We exceeded if it's below this amount, it's a failure. So, yay team. Also got a lot of good word out to a lot of people so they actually know where we're at. So I'm chalking that up as a win, and we're going to be doing that again back in next May around Memorial Day. We also had, we had poppies on Sunday. One of my viewers came and helped us out. We sat there and worked a really good little tag team because between me and the store runner, who's another guy at the post, we were just like spazzing out like golden retriever puppies on people. I mean, we're singing, we're dancing, I'm reciting poetry, we're just having a grand old time. And then our viewer, or listener, or client of mine, she's like over there just being all sweet with her little vest on and her little thing. And people would like avoid me and give her money as a bribe so they didn't have to interact with all this. All right. So don't care. We made money. And we actually had the best store out of all the stores that we're running in the post. So winning. But what's not winning? Well, our numbers are like flatlined. Not like in numbers went down or anything like that. They just sort of paused. It's like the whole real estate market's taking a breath. All right. A lot of people are talking to, that we're looking at like a 0.5 point drop coming up in December. We did have a little surge of interest and stuff because we are getting rates. I'm seeing 5s often now. I got a client right now. We're scheduled to close on Tuesday. His rate is going to be 5.75, and because of negotiating, we might be able to actually get that a little bit lower than that. We got a lot of money on the table and not a lot of places to spend it on. So we're going to try to spend some of that buying his rate down even more, right? But the rates are not what we wanted to be. Longtime listeners will remember some time ago when I was talking, we were looking, who was it? About 2 years ago. It would have been 23 going into 24. There was a person who was saying that we would be seeing 5s sometime in 24, and it didn't happen. All right. Now I said we'll see 5s in 25, and now we're just starting to see it happen. All right. And like I said earlier, and like we've been tracking, there is a theory of the case out there that says that the reason why these rates are not going down is because banks have realized that they are stuck in loans in the 2s, less than inflation, and they're afraid the next loan that they write tomorrow might wind up, under inflation. Right? So they're keeping the rates artificially high because they're not willing to lend you the money out at a lower rate, because a lot of the things that create, oh wow, I just did bird hands. Okay, sorry. If you guys don't know what bird hands is, it's very controversial. All right, apparently it's a thing that some videographers and podcasters and stuff with more X chromosomes than me like to use when they're lecturing people. I don't bird hand. So I have no idea where the hell that came from. So we're going to take that back. All right. Because bird hands are way, way overrated. So anyways, where were we at before the bird hands came up? Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to keep plucky here so I don't bird hand you guys again. And I do apologize for talking down to you like that, because we all know what the bird hands means when somebody with more X chromosomes than me are giving you the bird hand. So we need to get, lenders are not willing to lend you money that may potentially wind up being less than inflation. All right. We have a huge and potentially inflationary statement that just came out this week from a certain person who will go unnamed. And, Dad, this entire episode is just for you. All right. Because, hey, let's just send everybody $2,000 checks. No. This is how we got here. Let's just throw checks around. That's no bueno. All right. That's not good for people who haven't been caught up by ice. All right. That is not a good idea. So if you're going to sit there and start saying that you're going to start throwing money around like that, the banks are going to look at that, rightfully so, as inflationary, and they're not going to lower the rates. All right. This is how the world works. So where is it impacting right now? Well, there's a plan out there. But to see if the plan's going to work, we first have to know where we're at. And the problem with knowing where you're at is you need to know where your mouse is when you click the button, because you might just accidentally stop recording. Okay, from the top. All right, here are the numbers for November 12th, 2025. Actives this week are 25,424. They're up 3 from last week. All right, new listings were 2,022. That's down 250 from last week. Our contracts are at 2,100, which are down 170. And our closings last week were 1,133, which is pretty average for the first week of the month. Coming soon to an MLS near you is 498 new listings. Now, our supply is sitting at 104.7. We have 105 houses where we should have 100. Our demand is at 81.9. So we have 82 buyers for every 100 houses. And our Cromford report number is 78.2. That's our ratio, but it is actually slowly crawling up. So this is where it gets really fun and interesting. Let's take a look over here. All right. And Fountain Hills, okay, is leading the pack at 162.0, up 5%. All right. So Fountain Hills, Chandler, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, and Gilbert and Cave Creek are all in the seller's market. But take a look at Gilbert and Cave Creek. No change. All right. Now, Gilbert statistically changed a little bit, but it didn't average out more than a percent. So it shows a 0. And Cave Creek actually went up a little bit, giving us a 0. All right. Red arrow, green arrow. Let's take a look at Phoenix. 0 change, yellow minus sign, meaning no change, 105.2. Now, we still have areas that are dropping. Oh, and we have Tempe, being Tempe. This time last month, they were a buyer's market. Now they're a balanced market. All right. Then we have Glendale, Peoria, Goodyear, Surprise, Santan Valley, Queen Creek, Buckeye, and Maricopa at the bottom. But seeing 3 zeros on there, I'd really like to see the delta, see how much these changes are. But we might be just sort of hitting this little part right here. Okay. It's almost like we're taking a big breath. Now, we're also taking a big breath right before we go into the winter doldrums. All right, people don't really like to look at houses between November and Christmas. All right, so we're getting into our slow period here. And this, if it stays just like this over the next 2 months, it's going to make for a really interesting January. So the reason why I'm pausing is because you guys don't realize this, but I just recorded a good chunk of video that was brilliant, awesome, erudite, funny, enlightening, and at some point in the transaction, I actually hit the pause button, so none of that actually recorded. So I had to start all over again. All right. So what we're looking at is we do not have a lot of sellers coming into the market, or a lot of buyers coming in the market. Sellers are going into their little pause that we see every winter, because if they decide, hey, if I can't get rid of the house, I might as well stay in here for the holidays. All right. So, but one of the big things out there, big catch points, is affordability. All right, so we have affordability of houses, And the administration's in a really, really nasty spot. I'm sorry if I've already said this, but I can't tell you where exactly that stopped, so we're going to repeat on you. It's not like you guys have not gotten used to me saying the same things to you over and over and over again. So listen, so I only have to tell you once. All right, so affordability is mostly driven by interest rates, price of the houses, right, and how much money people are making and putting in their pocket. Right? Interest rates and the actual raw price of the house, okay, tend to get lumped in, and then it's how much money you make. The economists use that versus income. I split the interest rate out. Okay, price of house, interest rate, and also insurance and all of the other good stuff. All right, local taxes. All right, so that three-legged stool of housing affordability. And think about it. Of those things, how much does the administration actually have a control over? Not a lot. Right? You can't call up the Fed. Trust me, he's tried, saying, hey, dude, drop it. Right? It's not going to happen. Right? Fed's going to do what the Fed's going to do until they're up against the wall. All right? But the Fed is going to do what the Fed's going to do. All right? And I think the big thing that nobody is mentioning is that the Fed has lost control themselves. Because the banks, even though they've seen all these rate drops, aren't following in lockstep. Because the banks are looking at inflationary problems. Right. So that $2,000 check that has been talked about for every U.S. taxpayer is going to repeat the exact same inflationary mistake the previous administration did. Because we had a big check that came out during the previous administration. It was supposed to be for COVID. It actually came out after COVID was pretty much over. And it was what the previous administration of that, which is also the current administration, had been trying to get past a Congress that was held by the other party during the previous administration. And they thought it was a really, really lousy idea until the previous administration came in, and then that previous Congress decided that was a really good idea and rolled it out. And then we had inflation. So what does the current administration start thinking? Because now the current administration has the current Congress, and somebody opens up their mouths to start talking about, and it's just one of those little test bubbles. We all know what he does. He'll just float something out there, watch the polls real quick, see what happens, right? And then if he gets a lot of support, then he starts rolling with it. And if he doesn't get any support, then he never talks about it again. The guy like A/B tests in the same sentence sometimes. It's rather fascinating to watch. But if we were to suddenly have $2,000 float out there, I guarantee you, somebody's going to say, hey, you could buy a house. This could be your down payment for a house. Now, as a real estate agent, I'd be really happy with a whole bunch of people suddenly deciding to come back into the market. Right? It would balance out those numbers a lot. Right? As a homeowner, I like it because the value of my house would go up because more people would be interested in buying. All right? But it's going to have an inflationary effect, which means bankers have to think long term. Bankers think longer than your average congressperson because your average congressperson does not think past their next election. Some of them are actually trying to think past the next 28 days because their girlfriend that their wife doesn't know about just said she was late. All right, so they're a little hyper-focused on that time frame, but most of them are only worried about the next election. All right, this sounds really good if we play this thing out before midterms, doesn't it? All right, let's see if we can't buy some votes. Both sides do it. They just call it different things. All right, so if this was to happen, you will see rates continuing not to go down, all right? The reason why rates are where they are at is because we have no plan to arrest this hellacious government spending, all right? We borrow more money to spend than we take in to spend, all right? And it's adding to the federal debt. And the one historical way of getting out of a whole bunch of debt is you suddenly watch your currency crash, right? And inflation is a slow motion currency crash. So banks who have to think long term, all right, if I got $10 billion wrapped up in 30-year notes, right, I need to make sure I can sell those notes. And for me to sell those notes, the notes have to be worth something. Otherwise, I got to sell the notes for less than face value to make up for the difference so that we're not actually getting any money back on inflation or interest, because inflation is worth more than interest. So how do we square this circle? If you're only hyper-focused on the price of housing, that one leg of the stool, right? Which honestly, the one leg of the stool is the one of the people who took, studies degrees. Okay, I mean, yeah, they're sitting there and they got a master's degree, but their degree of master of something studies, those people. All right. Understand is houses cost a lot. Houses cost a lot. Houses cost a lot. They don't understand the interest rate thing. All right. Because they're not a bachelor of science or master of science or even a master or bachelor of arts. They're a master or bachelor of studies. All right. But unfortunately, those people tend to vote a lot. So we focus on what the crowd focuses on. All right. And how do we bring down pricing? Well, if you are one of the people out there whose majority of your wealth is in assets, you don't want house prices falling down if you have a lot of your assets in real estate. Right? If you notice over like the last 50 years or so, I'd say really about 1971, so 54 years, take a look at what happened in 71 and go down that rabbit hole for the weekend. All right. Everything the federal government does is to protect the value of assets. All right. So, God, I'm just gone. The first one was not half as conspiratorial as the second one is. Now I'm just all really jazzed up. So, but if we can start talking monthly payments, okay, now housing starts getting affordable, and you don't have to lower the price of assets. Yay, team. We'll just make housing more affordable by make it easier for people to make that monthly payment. One of the ways to do that is raise income levels. But to do that, you have to get rid of the H-1B visa program, all right, and a certain Exorati billionaire has already said you can't touch that. I will get very upset, stop launching my rockets or whatever. All right, so we can't, so we can't do that. So, and we can't get the Fed to lower interest rates, and we can't get the banks to lower interest rates, and nobody owns a lot of real estate and wants to sell their house for suddenly less than what it is today. Remember, guys, a year ago, when the seller said we don't want to have to pay buyers' real estate agents, yay team, and all of a sudden they didn't have to do that. And there's not one seller out there that lowered the price of their house by 3%. Right? So what can we do? I know. Let's screw the consumer over one more time. And so this great idea comes out. Let's take that 30-year fixed interest rate. What happens if we pay that off over 50 years? It's like when you're buying a car. Remember, it used to be 5 years to pay a car off, and all of a sudden you had 7-year loans on cars? Well, you get to buy more car that way. You get to pay more money that way. Right. So I went and did the math so you don't have to. So hold on for just a second, and we're going to jump over to this. And let me show you the difference between a 30-year and a 50-year loan. All right, I'm going to put myself right in the center. Why? Because I am the center of the universe, and everywhere I look, the world's around me. All right, if you were to borrow $500,000 at 6% interest for 30 years, your monthly principal and interest payment would be $2,997 a month. That's before taxes and insurance, by the way. That is just to service that loan. All right. After 30 years and that loan is paid off, your total amount of interest you are going to have paid over the life of that loan is $580,000. That's in addition to your original $500,000 you took out. Got it? Now, if you decide to do a 50-year loan, and don't think that this is unheard of. All right, other countries do 50-year loans. Right? Japan has something called a 100-year loan. Right? 100-year loan is designed to be able to hand down to your children and your grandchildren. And at 100 years, your great-grandchildren. So, funny things countries do when they're trying to recover their economy, right? We don't play that game here in the U.S. I think most people out there couldn't say the name of their grandparents, or their great-grandparents, all right? But think about, if I suddenly got the family homestead in Nebraska from great-grandpa Red. Actually, that would be cool as hell. But still, you get the point on these things. Over here, we move for jobs, we move for all sorts of stuff. But if we borrow that same amount, $500,000 over 50 years, we're going to have $2,632 payment, right? $2,632 is going to be our monthly payments towards principal and interest. That is the difference between the two of them of $365 a month, which sounds like a lot of money. And actually, it's a good payment. It's a good difference between the two. That could be the difference between you affording that house that you want and you not affording that house you want. But if you take the next 50 years to pay that thing off, right, you are going to pay the banks $1,079,000 over the next 50 years. That is over $1 million in interest going to the banks. You see why the banks like this? Right? There's a big difference between the two, and that's at a fixed rate of 6%. So, as a bank, I'm not sure I'd want to take that kind of gamble that in 25 years I'm going to have a note out there that's only paying 6% when we're dealing with another 8, 9, 10% inflation rate that we've seen in the last 5 years. It's only for a quarter, but it was definitely there. You have no idea what's going to happen when COVID-2 electric boogaloo comes out, and everybody's locked down again and they're just shoveling money into the economy. All right, we go through another downturn, or we get suddenly $2,000 frickin' check. You have no idea what that's going to do with inflation. So as a banker, you might do 50 year, but you might actually do it or 50 years at, 6.5. 30 year at 6, 50 year at 6.5. And you'll do it. Right? There's a reason why lower interest rates are on 15-year loans, because it's less risk to the bank. Yes, make a much bigger mortgage payment. All right? We see what happens between a 30 and a 50. All right? So, this article right here, written by a Holly Brink, came out on Inman, and it said, stop freaking out about 50-year mortgages. They might save the housing market. Now, I'm pretty anti-50-year in case you haven't noticed it. So I went and read this article. And she mentioned something really interesting. It's like, you're not actually going to be in the house for 50 years. Your average homeowner sells at 11 years. All right. Now, the little slider thing that I was doing did not allow me to show what the payoff at 11 years was going to be. But on your 30-year loan, okay, that you took $500,000 out, if you make those payments of $2,997, right, at the end of 10 years, okay, so that's 120 payments, your balance owing on the loan, your payoff is going to be $4,017, right? That is $83K in equity if the house, is still worth $500,000. All right? In 10 years, if you are doing the 50-year loan, right, your balance remaining is going to be $475,000. So you're going to have $25,000 in equity. All right? $83,000, $25,000. So 50-year loan person can't sell their house yet, based strictly on how much they paid down. They'll have $25,000 to sell their house in. Now, you could sell it to Opendoor, OfferPad, or any of those other fintech companies. I'd be happy to do that. But even then, they're not going to be buying that house at that amount. They need to come underneath that. This almost locks in more people because I can't afford to sell my house. Right? We got a listing right now, not one of mine. Right? I'm looking at that thing. I did the math on it. I'm like, why aren't they doing a price drop? They're not doing a price drop because they're already at the point they have to write a check to get rid of that house. They bought it 2 years ago. There's been no appreciation in the last 2 years on housing. fact, some would argue we're in this really weird spot here where, depending on your zip code, you might actually be like 1% under than when you bought it last year. Right. So, other thing about this article, and this leads into it, is she says you're supposed to have between 2 and 2.5% appreciation. The house goes up in value on average. 50-year moving average is between 2 and 2.5%. So, theoretically, if that holds true, 2% of 500,000 is $10,000. So next year, that house should be worth 510,000. And the year after that, it's going to be worth 522, and so on and so forth. So the value of the house is worth more as your mortgage gets paid down. So yeah, if we have good appreciation, but we haven't had it for the last 2 years, because you don't get appreciation on property unless you have buyers to buy those new prices. You got to have at least a little. So, as an aside, I wondered I just worked it out. So, interest rates at 6, and I just had somebody closing on Tuesday with a 5.75, completely doable. All right, maybe we can get down to 5.5. All right, to get that $2,632 payment, interest rates would actually have to drop to 4.75. That's 4 3/4. But as we can see right now, the feds are doing what they can do slowly. All right, but the banks aren't interested in going down to 4.75. You could probably buy down to 4.75. So ultimately, what does this mean to you and me? I don't think this is really anything but just somebody saying something to make it look like they're trying to do something. All right. If you really, really, really wanted to start getting more home affordability, we can figure out how to get wages going up. Okay, probably that would mean getting really, real serious about the H-1B visa program, because that is impacting multiple sectors of the middle class, not just tech. We can also look at trying to rein in your local municipality about zoning issues. Now, see, the problem is the only people who get interested in zoning issues are the people who are living in a house that they own, because you are suddenly really interested in what's going on in that big field next to you. Right? And it's that classic, you get yours and then you pull that ladder up behind you because you don't want those people moving in next door. So that, got to get in insurance. Insurance costs are out of control right now because most insurance companies have way too much exposure to high-risk states, and those high-risk states will not allow the insurance companies to raise the rates, to the same amount of risk they're taking on, so they just push that expense over on everybody else. A lot like Obamacare, except for houses. Yeah, that's where we're at on that. So this week, and this week only, I think both of those plans that are floated out are an incredibly bad idea. And that's just my editorial in this whole thing. Right? Now, here's a scenario where you can use a 50-year. It's a tool. All right? I agree with Holly over here. This is a tool. It's a tool for a smart play. The problem is most people don't. They want to think they're going to make the smart play, but then they never do. All right? Here's a smart play with a 50-year loan. All right? Get the 50-year. Make the pay on it like it's a 30-year. Set and write in that check for $2,632. You write it for $29.97, and you send that off. All right, we've had this conversation before, right? Pay a little bit early, especially earlier in the loan. It has more snowballing effects later on, and it will make your rate less. This number right here, your total amount of, interest you're going to wind up paying, it'll make it last. It's a really, really smart move, right? And if you're sitting there and you really think we're going to wind up at 4.75 sooner or later, like it's going to happen. It's going to happen. All the talking heads on TV says this can't last and we're going to go down to 4.75. Well, instead of sitting on the sidelines waiting for your 4.75 like all the other people are, get the house now with a 50. When it comes down to 4.75, refinance. It resets that clock. Okay, now you have a 360 month loan again, but you got a house. I guarantee you, if we hit 475 and all those buyers start coming in, then you're going to start seeing your house appreciate. So, yeah, this is pretty much how this all acts. So I've been glancing really intently at that counter, making sure we are still recorded. I've been watching it like a hawk, just like I watch children and pets around water. All right. And even though I'm watching this, I'm not going to drive into anything flooded. And I've gotten at least 2 texts because there's people in my circle I need to call, because always work your circles. You guys have a really, really great weekend and everything like that. And I'll see you guys next week.